Good morning and welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us today. Our analysts are Democratic activist Betsy Sweet and former Republican State Senator Phil Harriman. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
After months of buildup, Vladimir Putin ordered attacks on Ukraine this past week, beginning the long-threatened invasion. The U.S. and its allies have imposed sanctions, which President Biden says will limit Russia's ability to take part in the global economy. He describes them as sweeping financial sanctions and stringent export controls that will have profound impact on Russia's economy. Phil Harriman, is the president taking the right path here? Is he not being tough enough? What do you think?
I sure hope these sanctions work. It's going to be very interesting to see how impactful they will be on the Russian economy. It'll also be interesting to watch how Russia and China, if they collaborate to help Russia overcome what likely appears to be a worldwide clamp on their economic opportunities. Although I do have to say, I sure wish the president had done more to prohibit their ability to transfer energy out of Russia. That's their cash cow. And I wish he would open up our ability to lease federal lands and get the Keystone Pipeline open so that we're not dependent upon Russia for our energy.
Of course, the Keystone Pipeline was only about 10% built, so that isn't going to help anybody in the short term, even if they did. Betsy, what do you think?
I think it's our only hope. And the hard part about sanctions is that they take a little bit to have an impact. And I think Russia has squirreled away a bunch of capital to try and get through this. I don't think they've squirreled away enough, obviously, but I think with the cooperation, one of the great things is that for the first time in a long time, we are not acting alone. We are acting in concert with our NATO allies and with allies around the world, with the exception of China, as Phil said. And I do think that, we have to reduce our dependence on Russian oil, but not by drilling public lands, but by heavily investing and getting up to speed all our renewable energy sources.
What about the politics of this? There have been some Republicans who have been criticizing President Biden for not doing more or doing it sooner. Some are doing so without praising Vladimir Putin at the same time. Yet we have former President Donald Trump referring to Putin's savvy and genius. Why would any former U.S. president be speaking so admiringly of someone who has invaded a sovereign nation, Betsy?
I have no idea. And this is from day one. He said in the beginning of his presidency, Vladimir Putin is my friend. He's a great guy. He's really smart. So he has, he built him up. And I think that the relationship between the United States and the sort of stopgap that we have been for many years totally dissipated under Trump. And to have him say anything positive about what is happening is completely reprehensible. And the fact that the Republicans are allowing him to say it and aren't really saying anything it just seems to me to be this is a situation that cannot be partisan political rhetoric. And we have got to actually all band together. And the fact that we are not doing that, I think, shows the disarray in the Republican Party.
And Phil, for one, Senator Ted Cruz has been saying that Vladimir Putin didn't invade Ukraine during the Trump administration because the U.S. signaled strength and resolve against Russian aggression during those years. Is he right about that?
Yeah, he is. And those are the facts. And it's also a fact during the Obama administration, Putin invaded Crimea. So the facts are what they are. And I think in context, and I'm not defending Donald Trump, I absolutely abhor what is going on there. But I think what the president and Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, were trying to say is that strategically, Putin has played this in a way in which we're on the defensive. And back to what you asked earlier, these sanctions, in my view, should have been put in place sooner so that they would feel the effect before he ultimately invaded. Let's hope he's on the right path, because as Betsy says, there's no room for us to be divided as a country. We need to be supportive, and hopefully President Biden is successful.
Let's shift our gaze to Augusta, where Governor Mills has crafted a bill meant to get tougher with Central Maine Power and Versant Power and perhaps mollify those who are demanding a consumer takeover of those utilities. But the bill seems to have left both sides unhappy. Betsy, what happens next here?
I think both sides are very unhappy. And I think the problem with the bill is it just misses the mark. As long as we have a power company whose primary purpose is to ensure that their shareholders, and in this case, mostly foreign shareholders, get money, It cannot have the same mission. The mission of getting us service and getting us reliable, inexpensive service comes second or third or fourth. And this bill does nothing about that. There's a good whistleblower protection thing in there. But other than that, I think it misses the mark in terms of what the real problem is. And that's why it's landing on deaf ears on that side. And then, of course, CMP and Versant they do not want any regulation. So.
Phil, what do you think?
Well, I think the governor has strategically made the right decision to put something forward, acknowledges that CMP and Versant need to improve their performance. I think the facts are showing that they already are, and I get that from Phil Bartlett, chair of the Public Utilities Commission. So hopefully they're on the road to restoring or earning the respect of the consumer. But as you pointed out in your question, both sides are not happy. Maybe that's a good thing. And also, let's remember that the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, is empowered by law to regulate these utilities because they are a regulated monopoly. And if they're not doing their job, then this is probably why Governor Mills has put forward this legislation, because they do have the authority to hold them accountable already.
As he begins his campaign for a potential third term, former Governor Paul LePage talked with News Center Maine's Lee Goldberg about working with others in Augusta, something that proved difficult in his 8 years in office.
The big change in me has been the last 4 years watching what's going on in the country, and I'm absolutely convinced that if we continue to hate each other, we don't find a path to at least like each other and respect each other, our country is in for a doom. Our Constitution is not going to survive.
Yes, I'm delighted to hear Governor LePage make those statements. Many of us were trying to impress upon him when he was in office the first time how important being respectful to others and recognize that he's a diplomat on behalf of all of the people of Maine. Good for him, and I think that is going to make a difference. Whether he can maintain that composure through the rigor of a campaign is going to tell the voters all they need to know.
But should he have to take some responsibility for helping to create that division in Maine, Betsy?
Absolutely. No question.
Betsy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's number one. And I think someone, before we can actually trust their change, does take that responsibility, that personal responsibility. You know, his actions, both policy, but also his personal actions, calling up legislators and reaming them out on the phone with obscenities. You know, that's not somebody who has tried to create us all getting along and liking each other and respecting. If that is where he has come and he has gotten that to a personal place of that, great. That's awesome. But I think, as Phil said, whether he can maintain it and whether it's reflected in his policies, and even as he turned in his papers, you know, he showed such venom for people who he believes, and I would say wrongly, but he believes are lazy people who are collecting state government benefits and not working. You know, the facts just don't bear out that. But that indicates a kind of not respect and not all liking each other and getting along. So I hope it's true. I am very skeptical.
President Biden made some news on Friday. He nominated federal appeals court judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to become the first black woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. She would fill the vacancy that will open when Justice Stephen Breyer retires at the end of the term. Biden, of course, made a campaign promise to further diversify a court that has been made up entirely of white men, or was for almost 2 centuries. Jackson is 51. She's an attorney who possesses what they describe as an elite legal background, but has also worked as a public defender. And Judge Brown got 3 votes from Republicans in the Senate last year when she was named to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. So, Betsy, do you think Republicans are going to have a serious opposition to this nominee?
I don't see how. I mean, she is a brilliant lawyer. I think the fact that she's been a public defender is really important and hasn't been on the court for a long time. I think that is a really smart pick. She worked for Justice Breyer as a clerk. And we had our own Senator Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Lindsey Graham all voted for her within the last year to go to the court that she's currently serving on. So I think it's going to be a hard sell to say, oh, well, I thought she should be good in that court, but not on the Supreme Court. So I think they're going to have a hard time. I think it's a brilliant pick in terms of her qualifications. I think it's great that he's fulfilled a campaign pledge to make the court look more like America. And I think politically it's really smart, because how do you, in 6 months, decide that someone you thought was qualified now isn't?
And Phil, you've expressed in recent weeks some concerns or reservations about the president perhaps trying to fill a quota or checking various gender and race boxes. But now that the nomination is here, do you think Republicans are going to fight hard to stop it?
I hope not. President Biden made it very clear that before he was even elected, he was going to determine what personality, what skin color, what gender was going to sit in that seat. And he's chosen someone, as Betsy pointed out, who is eminently qualified. And what I like best about it is that she's been on both sides of the judicial process, being a public defender on one side and being an interpreter of the law and the Constitution on the other. There's no reason for this woman to be objected to.
Maine lawmakers are considering a bill that's designed to help people who want to buy a home. It would forgive up to $40,000 in existing student debt for the first-time home buyers who go through the Maine Housing Authority's first-time loan program. If it's passed, it's estimated this program would cost the state $10 million. Phil, is it a good idea?
Well, I don't know, to be blunt with you, Pat. There is already a loan forgiveness or a amnesty in place on federal student loans that's going to be activated in May, which I'm not sure the Biden administration has clarified for those people who have to start repaying their loans in May, but that is well known. But I understand the goal, which is try to get people into homes. And if it's part of a loan forgiveness program, give them a reason to plant their roots here in Maine. So I think the big picture makes sense. The details are what's going to matter.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at the bigger picture. I think it's a great little baby step. But what it does is point out to us exactly what many of us have been saying, is that the burden of student debt that is for kids and young people in Maine, my own children, and people across this country is so large that it is preventing them from buying cars, from buying homes. It affects their career choices. And so I think it's an acknowledgement that this whole student loan issue, which could be resolved at the federal level, is really playing a part in the economic security and the population security of places like Maine and across the country. So I think it's a good first step. I think, obviously we have to look at the details, Phil, but I think it's an acknowledgement of how big this problem really is.
President Biden will deliver his first State of the Union address on Tuesday night. Betsy, what do you expect to hear and what would you like to hear from him?
Well, I think we're going to hear about COVID and hopefully the beginning of the denouement of this pandemic. I think we will hear a lot about Ukraine and about working with our allies and being part of a global community, which I think is important. What I'd like to hear is more resolve to say we are going to get done the very things that are going to move this economy forward, like getting rid of student debt, like providing health care and better prescription drug support and climate change. And I think some of those things that have been blocked by Mitch McConnell and this, stalwart, like we're not moving forward, some of the things that are in the Build Back Better program that we know would both help the economy and help people in their everyday lives, I'd like to see more resolve about getting that stuff passed.
Phil, what do you expect to hear from the president, or what would you like to hear?
Well, what I expect to hear is that all of our problems today are because of Russia, and he's doing his best to resolve this conflict, and life will return to normal once this is over. What I'd like him to acknowledge is that his campaign rhetoric of working across the aisle and being a uniter and a moderate, that he's going to move in that direction, that he's acknowledged that the decisions in Afghanistan probably should have been done differently. Just to acknowledge that some of the steps that were taken produced results that the American people are not supporting, and that going forward from here, there's going to be a different agenda in how he governs. And let's also remember, as my understanding is, that there is a truckers convoy descending across the country that's going to be on the mall the evening of his address. It's going to be a very interesting environment if that is actually going to take place, to see how he speaks to the American people and the reaction of everyday Americans.
We shall see. Let's wrap up with our winners and losers in politics this week. Betsy, we'll start with you.
I've got to go to Ukraine, and the loser obviously is Vladimir Putin and all of the oligarchs and people that he is doing this on behalf of as a power grab. He is the big loser, I think. And the winners are the people in Russia and across the world who are standing up for peace. We could make this a moment where the world demands peace, and those people are brave. They are getting detained, and I think the fact that they are willing to stand up and say, no, this is not who we are, and we want peace, is they are my winners.
Phil?
I would ditto what Betsy said and add to it more locally. The loser, in my view, this week is the city officials in South Portland who were planning to move forward with a meeting on homelessness shelters and doing it in private. They're a public entity. Those meetings should be open to the public. And the winners, again, more locally, is high school basketball tournament, although it was delayed on Friday because of the storm. It appears that at least that part of our lives is getting back to normal.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you for being with us. That's it for Political Brew this week. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.